Ask this and the person you're dating these questions. I'm so excited to be sharing this topic. And I have Dr. Taylor Burrows in the house to share us her perspective on dating, discernment, and vetting, which that's her area of expertise. So Dr. Burrows, welcome.
Oh, this is going to be so much fun. I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Jonathan, for having me.
And I'm going to call you Taylor. Is that okay?
Absolutely,
Okay, cool.
please.
So, I am a big proponent of vetting. I've been talking about vetting before. Well, I feel like I'm one of the first people to actually use that word. Kind of makes me think of when you vet for a politician or something. But the idea is who would be right for me? Who's compatible with me? And maybe going a little bit deeper than the surface. So since this is your area of expertise, I just want to dive into it. Like, what's one big thing, like one top topic you think of when you think of vetting, discernment, when it comes to dating, mating, or relating?
One of the things I have to explain to people right off the bat is that vetting is not just about asking questions, right?
Okay.
So it's also, and probably more so, about observations, looking
Okay.
at behavior and real life scenarios, because you're trying to reveal the truth of a matter. Like, who is this person and how do you show up together? So it really doesn't mean that you're going to get the outcome that you want. It's
Okay.
about revealing the truth that you need to accept. So it's creating clarity. And a lot of people don't get that. They're really just looking for like a clipboard with 20 questions on
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
That's only part of it.
It's interesting. As you said this, I'm gonna I'm gonna throw you off kilter for a second. So I joke, most dating coaches will tell you never interview someone on a date. And I jokingly say we should interrogate people. But let me explain why I say it, and I want your take on this. Is that what is the purpose of an interrogation from a like a professional, like a detective, right? It's to get to the truth. And what you were just describing earlier was about getting to the truth of a person. I jokingly use that because if you ever watch professional interrogators, they're masterful at not just asking the questions, but listening to what's coming back and then, taking it down a road to find out more about this person. So I wonder what's your take on that.
Well, this is what I will explain. When you are asking questions,
Yeah.
you're actually getting information about the person's self-concept, not necessarily the truth. So you have
Okay.
to kind of triangulate data points in order to verify that what they're saying about themselves is true, which is why in investigations, you do interrogate them, but then you have to actually go out there and do the collection of the evidence to verify what actually happened. So you're taking in different data sources and triangulating, like bringing them all together and comparing and contrasting what you're getting to get the full picture. So that's why I say it's only part of the process, but there's more to it.
So you said something. Did you say self-perception, was
Yeah.
it their self-perception of themselves, not necessarily the
Right.
truth?
Yeah.
I
So
love
yeah.
this. So let's dive into that a little
Okay.
bit more,
Sure.
because I think we all have a perception of who we are, but is that really who we are?
Mhm. And it's funny because I had some developer of like a dating app on, not a dating app, but like a matching thing. And they
Okay.
came on to a group that I was talking to, and they justified this idea that asking people these questions is extremely valid for finding compatibility. And I pushed back on him and I was saying, I don't agree with you. And this is why, because it actually tests what people think that they want or who they think they are. But in actuality, they're showing up very differently, which is why I focus on, when I'm working with people, on the self work first, the self vetting. So, what I call alignment mapping. So, it's getting the person to be self aligned so that,
Okay.
you're working out all the kinks, their attachment wounds, their emotional dysregulation, their poor judgment, their reactivity, all of that stuff gets sorted out in the beginning so that their judgment can be clarified.
Well, does that mean that dating today almost requires a PhD? I mean, you're a doctor, so, do you have to have a PsyD, a PhD, an MD to be
Well,
able
no,
to?
of course
Okay.
not. Of course not. But it depends on what is the quality of the relationship that you're looking for and who are we talking about? Because I don't want to sound elitist, but a lot of my clients are very, successful, they're high IQ, whatever. And so they're looking for people who are equally yoked, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's important, is to know who we're talking about. So if someone is functioning at a different level than of competence, then I'm not really speaking to them. I'm speaking to people who are they have a capacity for high quality relationships, functioning, kind of on the above average level. And I think that's important. Some people, they're just satisfied with a mediocre relationship,
Yeah.
but I hope that that's not true, but I think it probably is. What do you think?
Well, that's a great question, because I want to respond by saying I recognize this might sound elitist, as you were saying, but it's more about the capacity, I think, is to have a level of emotional maturity
Mm.
and the capacity to articulate your thoughts and feelings in a way that can be seen, heard, and understood, the capacity to regulate one's emotion or nervous system. And more importantly, and this is something I just had a conversation with my beloved about, is how to resolve conflict. And we were having this kind of juxtaposition in what we were talking. I'll share this with you because I think this relates, is that we were trying to discuss measurements of a daybed to fit in this room. We're moving in together at the end of the month. And
Yeah.
she was describing it one way, but I kept hearing it something different.
Mhm.
And what ended up happening was we had a disagreement in context. And you would think something like measurements and things like that wouldn't create that. But the way she was perceiving it and the way I was perceiving it, two different things. And you could hear our voices going up, our volume going up.
Mhm.
And we were almost getting to the point where it wasn't yelling, but you know what I mean? It wasn't a fight or an argument, but there was a disconnect. And we stopped right in the middle and said, wait a minute, let's both take a deep breath. We need to, de-escalate our own nervous system. And she always, what I love about her is she always says, how can we come from love?
Mhm.
Like that's her
Right.
way of being. And to me, that's a higher, like we're using the term higher or lower, but
Mhm.
that's more of a higher frequency to approach relationships. So when I heard you saying that, I'm kind of envisioning it from that vantage point.
Yeah. So to go back to what you asked, I definitely don't think that you need to have like a PhD or a high
Yeah.
IQ or whatever in order to be out there dating successfully. But it is important for you to be self-aware.
Okay.
That is what is really important for people to understand, that you can't just go out there willy-nilly throwing spaghetti at the wall and thinking that you're going to make it work. Vetting without, or dating, whatever you want to call it. I call it vetting. You might call it dating. Not you, but other people
No,
out
I
there.
got it.
So you cannot do it with a chaotic frame of mind. You have to have some structure to the
Yes.
process. And that's what people forget, that it's not about making it cold or clinical at all, right? Like you still need to be heart-centered and grounded and empathic and all of that. And yes, chemistry is good, and having love for people is good. But if you don't have that logical component to dating, it is going to end up being chaos.
I had a friend of mine who's a dating coach on Laurel House, and she characterized it: the head, the heart, and the hormones. And you have to start with the head.
Mhm.
And that may not be sexy, it may not be romantic, and yet it requires, and what's interesting, even my girlfriend called it data collection. That's how she looked at dating. Like she called it data collection. So, okay, I want your take on something. So one of my data points that I am a big proponent for people to observe, and I'd be curious if this aligns with you or not, is getting a sense of someone's past relationship experience.
Mhm.
Most importantly, listening to how they characterize the last person or the last few people they were with. Do they come at it from a hostile, antagonistic point of view, or are they coming at it from a self-ownership point of view? Because in my mind, if they come at it from a self-ownership point of view, that's more emotionally mature. If they're pointing the finger at their past relationships, there might oftentimes be an unresolved issue. And I'd be curious if that's even in the scope of your practice and teachings.
Oh, absolutely. It's so important for the person to have that humility, accountability, the growth mindset, and also detachment from the past, right? From past relationships. If someone is still harboring a lot of resentment or anger, they're not detached yet. And that's never a good sign, because you want someone to have, this is what I do, is I get people to a place of secure attachment, right? Because if you're still in that fuzzy place where, you have these weird attachments, or you're just anxious or avoidant, then you're putting too much onus on the person that you're dating to fix you, right? Like that, for other people that aren't committed to you yet to be responsible for that, I think is unrealistic. So we have to be responsible for all that baggage. And the way that they talk about their ex, if it is hostile like that, then it does indicate that they're just lacking some self-awareness, because there's got to be something that they can learn from, that they can take ownership of, like you said, from, making mistakes, choosing the wrong person, even if the person was a narcissist.
Yes.
You chose them, right? Yeah. So what did you do in order to get hooked by them?
Oh, it's funny you mentioned narcissist, because about a decade ago, I'd met a woman. We met through social media. We connected, and I said, "Oh, tell me about your marriage." And she says, "Oh, I was with a narcissist." And I said, "What about the last person you were in a relationship?" "Oh, he was a narcissist." And the one before, like, it was like 4, right? And Taylor, I'm listening going, well, since I'm not a narcissist, I'll be the knight in shining armor, right? And what was fascinating, we only dated for 6 weeks, and I realized we were radically misaligned. The following day on social media after this ended, it was like I dated another narcissist.
Oh no.
And it struck me, and I should know better, right? Like, I should know better. I listened, I heard, but I immediately do what I think so many people do, is when they hear someone throwing their previous partners, and I'm going to call it under the bus. Okay. I mean, that there's maybe a better characterization. We often take it on face value that they're speaking their truth, which that's what she and I'm certainly sure men say as well. But there's a hidden message going on when it is pointing the finger at someone else, because a big part of emotional maturity, I think you would agree, is that self-responsibility, that self-ownership, that reflection that even if someone was, I mean, look at, if you have to call a doctor, a policeman, or a doctor, policeman, or a lawyer, for an ending of a relationship, that's a whole different ballgame. I get that. But is that if there's not self-examination, that's a clue that this person may not be prepared for a more significant relationship. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, this also goes back to what I was saying before, that you can't trust necessarily what the person says. It really just tests their own self-image and their perception. It doesn't actually test the truth. So you trust, but verify. So that's another important concept to remember. But yeah, if they're constantly pointing the finger in that case and blaming the other person, even just catastrophizing, this shows a lot of reactivity. So a person who doesn't emotionally regulate, they're not emotionally mature, or maybe worse, like maybe they have their own pathologies that are, being perpetuated underneath this guise of blaming other people, then that's, someone that you want to sidestep. Like you said, I realized in 6 weeks that we were radically misaligned. Why and how did you notice that you were radically misaligned?
It's interesting. So, and it took me years to notice in my own life, but certainly in my professional life, that it's almost our traditional way of dating has been focused on attraction, entertainment, romance, and physical connection. I mean, most people focus on attraction first, then there's a need to be entertaining one another. There's almost this need to romance to get the engine started, and it's often built on physical attraction. And what I learned in many instances before, and the irony is, here's, I'm a dating coach and I still made, made the mistake of getting caught up in the chemistry of a relationship. and not really paying attention. Does this person feel like a friend? Like, and friendship is, and I don't mean like friend zone kind of friend, that which
Mhm.
usually just means I don't want to sleep with you, or I don't want to be in long-term I think women say friend zone, I don't want to sleep with you. Men say friend zone, I'll sleep with you, but I don't want to be in a long-term relationship with you. Um, and that's just a judgment, and that's a generalization. But what I observed was I paid more attention to the physical and chemistry in the past. And in my current relationship, and why this is so pivotal to what my shift is, that friendship is an intangible. It's like, do I really like this person for who they are outside of that lust or limerence? And when I realized after 6 weeks, we weren't really friends with one another, it took a while because I was operating on like old software, if you will. I don't know if I'm making sense to you at all,
Yes. Yes. No,
but
I'm thinking of so many things that I could comment
oh, then
on.
I want to hear it all.
Well, the way that I see what you're talking about, the friendship aspect, which I get what you're saying, is companionship, and that would relate to like secure attachment, right?
Yes.
If you have a level of respect and just general like affinity for someone, like you have a developed secure attachment with them, and that is part of love, right? It's not the lustful infatuation, chemistry, desire, sex part, but
Yeah.
it is the love component of a relationship. And if you don't have that, then and you're chemistry focused or lust forward, then yeah, your judgment is going to be clouded. In my vetting system, I teach people not to get physical before you have done sufficient vetting
Okay.
for compatibility and complementarity and alignment, because attraction is the easiest thing to determine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
It
either
is
there or not.
instant. It is the first thing that you decide in an instant if you like what you see in this
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
Then you're like, do I like how I feel around this person?
Yes.
And so, really, attraction is so simple and we overcomplicate it. It's just, do I want to, them? Do I
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have
It's okay.
them?
Well, by the way, we're R-rated here.
Okay. So do you want to have sex with them?
Yeah.
And do you like them as a person? Like those are the only two requirements of really being attracted to someone. Yes, you could just be like a lustful situation where you don't like them, but you want to have sex with them.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like let's rule that extreme out for now.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
if you're trying to like have a relationship, you just need to like them and want to have sex with them. That's it. That's the bulk of like attraction. And so you
Well,
know that pretty fast.
do you believe, and it's interesting. Well, I'll share something personal with you, because in my relationship, we had amazing emotional chemistry, intellectual chemistry, spiritual chemistry, but there was no spark on our first date. Like there was no, I mean, it wasn't that I thought she was unattractive, but there wasn't this spark. And it wasn't until about 50 hours of telephone calls afterwards, unpacking why there was no spark, that all of a sudden it started to form. And what I realized was the reason why I didn't have spark, because my old attachment wound wasn't being activated. I'm an anxious attacher. I tend to choose avoidance. And because that wasn't being activated, in her case, it wasn't being activated, we actually had a secure thing, and that was foreign to me. I think a lot of, and I'd be curious if there's any evidence to this.
Mhm.
I think we can meet someone where we actually are feeling secure attachment, and because it doesn't feel like chaos, we mistake it as no chemistry.
Absolutely. People are misconstruing activation or reactivity for
Yeah,
attraction, and
yeah.
it is not the same thing. Being activated by someone and dysregulated by someone is not true attraction. That's why there is evidence, there is support, scientific research
Okay.
out there that shows that violent danger arouses you.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
Right? So that is true, but that doesn't mean you want to willfully consent to intercourse, right?
Yeah.
Just because your body is aroused
Yeah.
by violence or whatever does not mean that. And so we need to understand that there's a distinction between being physically stimulated
Okay.
and being truly attracted to someone based on a conscious, willing decision.
Okay.
right? So it's still based on physicality, but
Yeah.
because true attraction needs an element of safety, right?
Yes.
That's why when you are accustomed, when you're functioning on that old operating system of being dysregulated and you have attachment wounds, when
Yeah.
it is safe, you feel like you're not attracted to someone, even if cognitively you can say, well, they're attractive, but I'm not feeling it.
Yeah.
Something is missing, right? And that's why, because you actually feel safe with them, which is a good
Now
thing.
it's fascinating because I've now physically experienced it. We both were in shock that there was this neutrality. But what I think happened in the neutrality, we weren't driven by the hormones, as I talked to you about. We
Mhm.
got to know each other from the head and the heart. And then eventually the hormones kicked in, and now it's a fantastic relationship, and we're moving in together. Taylor, really quickly, we've got some questions that have already come up. So,
Yes.
for those that are watching live, if you have a question, write the word question and post the question there after. Or you can purchase a super sticker, super chat. There's a little $ in the chat box. All the monies from the super sticker, super chat goes to a scholarship fund in the name of my son, Connor Aslay. He's my son who passed away over 7 years ago. In his honor, we donate to causes like the Hoffman Process, Insight Institute, and scholarships to coaching as well. So if you'd like to donate, just hit that little $. But I already see Dr. Taylor. I'm calling you Dr. Taylor now. We've got a question from Annika. So can you see it on the screen?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do.
So I'll read it out loud, and I'd like you to go first. Are you saying that asking questions is not important as observing the behavior? What about coming from a space and energy of curiosity when it comes to vetting? Oh, I like that question.
Oh, curiosity is such an important factor to assess for. Your own curiosity is what drives vetting, right?
Yeah.
Because if you are not curious, then don't say yes to a date. As soon
Yeah.
as the curiosity dissipates, then that is the natural, organic ending of a vetting
Yeah.
scenario. So wanting to have like answers to things is natural. I'm not saying don't ask them, but it's the way that you ask them that I think really helps. If you can create more of an organic context in which to bring them up, I think that really does help. I teach people to have phone calls and video calls before the first date because I'm a big proponent of not dating strangers. And getting away from like, dating apps and just meeting people that you met on a dating app or, people out there in the wild that you might meet in person. So if you can gather some information to get some basic compatibility out of the way, especially for women, right? You can get out of that neurotic mind and really be present in the moment and enjoy the date. And so you don't have to be thinking about like, all the questions that you have. Not that you can't ask a series of questions, you can, but to me and the evidence that I use in my vetting system, it really shows that the experience and the observing of behavior is much more valid than anything because what people do is often different than what they say, and watching that behavior over time.
Yeah.
You want to see consistency, but you also want to see how they show up in different scenarios. Right. So that's really important.
Absolutely. You want to see them in different circumstances. So I want your take because this is the way I've approached it. I always think of the first time maybe getting on a FaceTime or a video chat, just so you can kind of get a sense of this person, because dating, and I only say this because it's probably 75% of all first dates happen through some sort of online connection these days, unlike 50, 60 years ago. I then recommend a phone call afterwards and devote some time saying, hey, do you mind if we ask each other a few questions just to see if we're a fit with one another, to make sure that, we like the same politician or religion or that sort of thing. And then making the first date, I call it a meeting. And what I suggest is saying, hey, can we just strictly meet as friends, not a date, no pretense, no expectations. You don't have to perform. I don't have to perform. We can just be two people meeting as we would in a social gathering.
Sure.
But now I will tell you, a lot of people are like, have an expectation. They want to be entertained. They want to be romance, particularly on that first date, which I believe could be a recipe for frustration. I'd be curious how, this is my methodology, and I'd be curious how that lands with what you teach.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar to what I teach, but I just use like a different way of describing it. What I say is You're single, friendly, and social in the
Okay.
beginning. So you're
Okay.
not dating anybody. You're just single, friendly, and social. And you're getting
Yeah.
to know strangers. You're just, obviously, you're going to ask questions. If you're not curious and you don't have questions for someone, you're probably not that interested in them. You don't
Yeah.
want to get to know them if you don't like want to have like the information for something. And so in the beginning, you can be talking to multiple people because you're just single. You know, but the problem is, and this is what I was saying to someone just before we got on this podcast,
Okay.
was when you are interested in someone and you start going out on on dates with them, then it gets into this blurry area, especially for women, because I think women and men are very, very different. And for women, we're just not built to juggle men. We're just not built that way, in my
Okay.
opinion, opinion, right? And people think that intimacy is just sexual intimacy. No,
Yeah.
intimacy is physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, so many different types of intimacy. And women are neurotic. We are very anxious creatures and we're very emotional creatures, but we've been taught by society to hedge our bets, keep our options open, and to not be exclusive prematurely because I don't know, like it makes you look desperate or something. But ultimately, we're built for monogamy. You know, we can only have a baby with one man.
Yeah, exactly.
in a 10-month period, right? And so men are the ones that are so concerned about being cuckolded, right? Like if they don't know what you're doing when they're not around, they could end up raising another man's child and not know it because our society does not paternity test. Right? When you're at the hospital, I just had a baby 19 months ago, and I almost asked them, I was like, you should paternity test him. This should be a normal practice. It should be standard. They know my blood.
Oh, you're saying nowadays that should be a standard thing?
I do. I really think that they should, as a standard. I mean, you do multiple tests when you're at the hospital. Why not?
I'm laughing a little bit only because I'm watching a show that's set in the 60s, and there's somebody who's raising someone else's kid. But you're right. Like, what's the big deal with that? If they're going to do 100 other tests anyways.
Exactly. I mean, they know it came out of me, right? They know the baby came out of me, but the guy standing there, that's my husband, they don't know for a fact that that's the baby's father. And then I just write his name on the birth certificate. Like that seems very strange to me that they don't actually prove that. But anyway, I won't get off.
I would venture to say within a decade or less, that will probably be a norm. Most of my audience, Taylor, is in after baby making years. So that isn't as important. But I do have many in this,
and I'm trying to have a baby right now.
Oh, you are? Okay. Well, I always say, most people kind of cut that number off at 42 to 45. And now you're more I don't, nowadays, maybe that isn't the exception, but a decade ago or 2 decades ago, that was. So let me ask you, what do you think, what's one question you'd be willing to share with our audience that would be a good question to ask someone that would reveal and give some inkling of where they're at, emotionally, psychologically, that sort of thing. I'll share one that I think is important, but I'd love to hear if you'd be open to sharing one.
Gosh, that is a great question, because usually my questions are for the clients that I'm teaching, right? Not necessarily for, people out there. I don't like make up questions for them to ask the people that they're vetting. I usually just ask them questions first, but I'd love to hear yours. Can you go first? And then
so here's one that I get pushback on, but I believe asking about politics is an important question, but let me share why. Not that two people could be on two separate aisles and not get along with each other, but what I'm looking for when asking that question is, do they have rigidity in their ideology? Are they strict in an area, or are they fluid in an area? And I'm just suggesting, particularly because we're polarized a little bit here in the United States, that didn't used to be this way 10 or 20 years ago. I think it's an important question to ask, to get, not again to say that you're mirror images of one another, but to see where if they're rigid in their ideologies, or and I look at politics as a reflection of your ideologies, your values, and that sort of thing. And I think it's an important question to ask. And and by the way, you may disagree with me on this, but again, I look at it from an ideological point of view and values.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, shared values are really important. And I mean, this is not really answering your question, but I think that compatibility is also misunderstood a lot because a lot of people assume compatibility is just being the same, like sharing.
Yeah. You like sushi? Me too.
But well, in addition to interests, like obviously the values are much more relevant, but you can't just share the right things. You have to differ in the right things. So that's where complementarity comes in. And a lot of people don't talk about that, but I focus on complementarity, which is really polarity, but in a non-sexual way. You know, it's kind of, it stems from the opposites attract idea.
Yeah.
But the problem with opposites attract is it kind of insinuates these extreme opposites, and extreme opposites do not work long term. In the short term, it may create a few sparks and you may have like a little fling or whatever, but it's not going to last long term for marriage or a life partnership. So what you need is you need to have some tension, some healthy tension between two people, because you want to be strong in certain areas that your spouse is going to be weak in, and vice versa, because you make a better team that way.
Sure.
So if you have variation in, like, let's use the big five, like introversion and extroversion, usually you want to have conscientiousness shared and openness shared, and agreeable and disagreeable, like you can vary on that, right? Because usually men are the more disagreeable types and women are the more agreeable types, and that actually works really well. So there are.
By the way, I've never understood that because I just believe in both people having an agreeable nature. But I keep going. I'm sorry to interrupt there.
No, that's okay. Yes, like you want someone when you're married to them to be collaborative with you.
Yes, exactly.
That is what is important. Yes. It's almost like talking about reciprocity, right? Reciprocity goes both ways. You have to have reciprocity in a healthy, secure, happy relationship. But when it comes to like the sort of polarity here, right? When I say men tend to be more disagreeable, it's because they have different responsibilities. They have different roles just as being men. They think differently, they feel differently, they process emotions differently and make decisions differently. And that's okay. And that's why we function well together. Not that I do work with LGBTQ people as well, but they usually are aligned with everything else in my system. And so it's totally fine. But my I don't know if ideologically that's what you mentioned. Ideologically, my system skews conservative. It's not like all the way right. It's not all the way traditional. I used to be liberal, but now I'm right of center. And so my values that I teach are more conservative leaning. And that's another thing that I think is different about the way that I do things, because I try to encourage people to do sequential dating, like what I was saying before. So it's dating or vetting one person at a time.
By the way, I have to interrupt. I've been saying this for a decade. I only believe in dating one person at a time. Now, the first time you meet someone, that's not necessarily, I call the first 2 times meetings, but if you meet them a third time and you want to continue seeing them, I'm a big believer of doing that one at a time. You know, you can meet someone and never see them again. So that's not something, if you're going to see each other more than 3 times, do it one at a time. By the way, I want to just share something with you. These are my scribble notes on what I was looking for 2 years ago. The first thing was reciprocity. My first value, just because it's important to me.
How many points do I get, Jonathan?
You nailed it. By the way, we have so many questions popping up. I want to get to that. And you're doing, I mean, we're going to end up talking for 2 hours. So Jesse says, question, what if they claim that the relationship was toxic? I was always told never to talk about exes and or previous relationships, which is why I didn't get him and it was too late.
Okay. Well, I mean, it could be that the relationship was toxic, but I think you have to have some decorum when you're answering questions like this. I think that shows respect for the other party. And just be graceful about it, like, or have dignity. You don't want to reveal too much. You don't want to trauma dump on anyone new.
Yeah.
So you kind of just giving the basic, polite things to say. Just imagine you are at a cocktail party, like in the holidays, right?
Yeah.
And meeting strangers. You don't go into all the details on first impressions. So you just say, yeah, it was a tough breakup and it took me a while to get over it. Like, you just say that kind of thing. Or if it sounds like if they're asking if it was a toxic relationship, maybe there's a little bit more familiarity.
I think the person claimed that they were in a toxic relationship, and that was the way they reflected upon their past. I'm a big, so here's my take on things. Maybe it's because I've been on this planet for 60 years or so. Before I met my beloved, I had a significant past before her. For her to get to know me, it requires understanding how I got to where I'm at today. And I'm a big proponent of getting a sense of who this person was before you met them. Now, for me to share my entire life would take 60 years. So, I could never do that on a first date, or even, 30 years with someone. But I do believe those are some of the things you want to get to know in your data collection, is a sense of their past. I had a woman I spoke to on a dating app once. This was a couple years ago. I said, when did your last relationship end? She said, last night. And she was on the dating app the next day. And I'm like, I asked that within the first 15 minutes. And I'm like, I don't want to explore anything with you.
Yes, that's actually what I was going to say would be my question. Would be like, how do you date, or how do you form relationships? Something about relationships and how they do that. Because if they do multiple dating, or if they do sequential dating, or whatever it is that are they polyamorous? Are they monogamous?
Yeah. Nowadays you have to ask that.
You really do have to ask. And so I think it's important to find out, like, what their values are around getting to know people romantically.
My friend, Ariel Ford, who wrote the book Soulmate Secret, gave me a line. She said, does anyone believe they're currently in a relationship with you?
There you go. Oh my gosh. That reminds me of something I've heard many people say, that women are never single. They're always chatting with people, and they always have someone on, like, the DMs or whatever. But I do think that people have a problem, or have a hard time being single.
Yes.
It's very hard for people to be single. They might be unattached or non-exclusive, but they're going out on lots of dates. They're having lots of intimate conversations, but they're not able to really be alone, single with themselves, and for that to be okay. So I do think it's really important for people to go through that period. And if, you have a mature audience, like, I have a lot of mature people in my community as well. I think it is important. Like, if you're 45 years old and you cannot and haven't had that opportunity to just sort of detox from attachments altogether for a little while, I would say that's important. Going on the dating apps the day after you break up with someone is a bit too fast.
I was like, and she gave me a reason. I'm like, I'm not in. I've been around the block enough to know I'd like to have at least a 3 to 6 month window, from a last experience. By the way, I think I saw a meme said, so you're single. Is that you're single, like you're not seeing anyone? You're single that you're not dating more than 2 people? Like, there was this list that went on of what single meant, because just even now, like, even saying to someone, I want a relationship. Well, does that mean you want a friends with benefits to relationship? Do you want a situationship? Do you want casual? Because the word is ambiguous. And I think getting a sense of someone's context is also part of that data collection of what does commitment mean to them, I think is an important question. What does a relationship even look like for you? Might be a great question.
Those are, I think, a great starting point. Because you have to figure out, you have to, like, define terms of where you're at single before you can define the relationship terms later on if you like each other. But here's another thing, and this is what I was talking to this lady about before. In regards to defining the relationship, I haven't been single for 7 years or whatever. And I'm just wondering what it's like currently with the people that you're working with and talking to, because to me, it shouldn't be so like weird to say, I don't feel comfortable seeing other people. Like I'm just gonna give us a chance to get to know each other, and I'm not gonna be seeing other people. Like to me, that doesn't pressurize the situation. Someone shouldn't feel like it's too early or too soon to let somebody know that. To me, it's a great opportunity to look at their response. Like
Yes.
how did they react to that? Are they like, oh, well, that's so refreshing to hear. I appreciate your honesty. And you know what? Like when I feel like I'm really into somebody, I don't feel comfortable going out with other people either.
Yeah.
Like that's normal, you know?
Well, I think certainly by the time two people become physically intimate with one another, at least look at, I could be draconian in this way, or even, what's the word I'm looking for? Righteous in this way. But I'm like, look, if we're going to be physical together, I'm talking sexually. Look, I kind of have an expectation, or at least my standard for myself is monogamy and exclusivity. And they are, I believe they're two different things. Monogamy, I'm not going to sleep with anyone else. Exclusivity is I'm not going to keep looking for other people while we're together.
Mhm.
And I think that's a fair request. It's a request to make as part of an agreement before that. That's one of a few things I believe that should be discussed before you become physically intimate.
100% in agreement with you there.
Yeah.
And I agree there's a distinction, and a lot of people just muddle them together and then feel like they're I don't know, like vulnerable, like they're too vulnerable by saying like, I'm going to put all my eggs in one basket and I'm going to commit to you, like I have googly eyes and it's going to make me look desperate, you know?
Well, you just said the C word. And this is where I think a lot of hang up is, because I look at commitment on a continuum kind of thing, and there's a difference between agreements and commitment. Like when I say I agree to monogamy, that's just an agreement we're making with one. I agree to exclusivity. That's an agreement. Commitment's another word that usually means that there's this intent. I would hope that we go, hey, let's intend to explore this with an agreement that if within 3 to 6 months, if we like each other, then we take it to the next level rather than being ambiguous. And sadly, and by the way, I mostly work with women, Taylor. So just so you know, and my clientele ranges from 40 to 70, most of my clientele, usually right around 55 or 60 is most of the sweet spot. And most women I've observed want some level of commitment. If we're going to go on this path, then let's do it because we have a long-term mating strategy and not just a hit it or quit it strategy kind of thing. So, but I think the word commitment trips people up. And I think let's just talk about agreements with one another that leads to a conversation that we both agree that we're doing it from a long-term perspective. Otherwise, if you're not, and this is what pisses me off about men. And when a man says, I want a relationship, they have sex, they spend time with you, and then all of a sudden, oh, I'm not looking for anything serious. I think that's chicken shit. I think that's bullshit. I think, that's just an excuse. I'm not just that into you, which is okay. You can walk away from someone, but don't make it about whether or not you care about something serious. Then fucking don't date if you're leading with that and then pulling it away. I'm sorry, I get a little righteous here.
No, good for you. We need more people to speak up about that. I mean, I have feelings like that too. I agree with you, but also about marriage. I feel like marriage is too flippantly rushed into or pursued by people who don't really want marriage. They just want a relationship.
Yes.
I feel like marriage is a different entity and it should be respected to be a specific type of relationship. If you don't agree to what a marriage really means, then you don't have to get married. Like it's not a requirement to be in a relationship. So people who have like open marriages and this and that and whatever, like to me, I'm just like, well, why even bother getting married? I mean, I guess.
Yeah, and sadly with second and third marriages ending at an even much higher rate, and whether they go in cavalier or not, it's this component. What I've observed, and this is where midlife people, my demographic is mostly divorced, is that it's kind of easy to conceptualize all in when you're in your 20s and 30s, because it's always, make a babies and raise a family. That's kind of the root of the relationship. It becomes a little more gray area, particularly in the concept of all in. And what's tricky about those of us that are in our 60s, all in means you're going to get sick and I'm going to take care of you. And a lot of people are afraid of that. There's this aversion to either taking care of someone else or being a burden to someone else. And this is the thing in the 60 crowd and above, where there's a kind of a juxtaposition going on, because it becomes really real, because the days in front of us are much shorter than the days behind us. By the way, we have another couple questions that came in, so I want to pop into those real quick. Pamela says, 3 times this week, I've heard equally yoked. I appreciate it comes from the Bible. I'm curious that I've heard it 3 times in a week. Something old made new being passed around. Mm-hmm. It's not really a question, but do you have any thoughts on it?
I get it. I know it came from the Bible, but I am kind of making it new. And this is what I was saying before.
Oh, did you say equally yoked earlier?
I did, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, I missed it. So, okay. Yeah.
I use that term because I think it applies. I think it's very relevant, and it shouldn't just be about faith. I think equally yoked is about parity. I talk about intellectual parity a lot, but it goes beyond that. Equally yoked is also being on the same level of emotional maturity, relationship readiness. And so it's a nice catch-all to me about compatibility.
I am so radically in agreement. I look at my partner and we're very equally yoked. Our sense of humor is kind of the same. Our finances are close to the same. Our intellectual, I mean, we're almost too, I don't want to say too equally yoked, but I will say this, it makes it so much easier. Particularly our sense of humor. I can't even begin to express how important that piece of the puzzle is.
Yes.
A lot of people just don't have a sense of humor, which makes shared sense of humor even more challenging. But boy, we are so equally yoked in that area. And I love it. It makes life so much easier. I think when you're misaligned, and let's think of the word yoked as alignment, which that's what I think you mean. Mm-hmm. The more you're aligned with one another, the more shared values, that lifestyle compatibility, that emotional maturity, I believe the easier the relationship is. Not to suggest misalignment doesn't work, but that's going to require way more presence, patience, intentionality, just to name a few, compassion, agreeableness when people are misaligned.
Yeah. And I don't know we didn't really talk about it, but my PhD is in marriage, couples, and family counseling. And I was a licensed mental health counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist for almost 20 years. And then I retired my licenses so I could work as a coach online before it was trendy. Okay. And this was one of the reasons, I had several reasons for doing it, but one of the reasons was that I wanted to focus on prevention versus cure.
Okay.
So, I think when you are incompatible or misaligned, it is so hard ending up in marriage therapy down the road, throwing a Hail Mary up when 2 people are kind of just at their wits' end. Somebody's foot is out the door, and it's really hard to save a marriage at that point. Yeah. So that was one of my experiences. Yes, I had lots of good experiences too, but it really frustrated me. I wanted to help people before they got married. And I'm like, how can I do this as a marriage therapist, helping people before they get married? So once I became an online coach, that's how I started to develop the vetting system, was to help people prevent incompatibility leading to divorce. And I find that, yes, of course you can, but it just is really, really hard. And rather than doing that, why not just focus on selection?
Yeah. It's interesting. I pulled up a book, which I'll share with you in a moment. But before we got this chat, we shared a little bit about our backstory and where your husband's heritage is, yourself and everything. And, when you think 100 years ago plus, when we lived in villages, tribes, when we lived in, most people that lived in a certain country, they dated people within that country. They dated with people that probably were in the same village. So you most likely, by de facto, had shared values, compatibility, and emotional just purely based on where you live. Now, in the last 100 years in the United States, we're a melting pot of so many different cultures, so many different ideologies and perceptions and that sort of thing, that it requires this vetting that we've been talking about. I feel like I've been screaming at the top of my lungs for a decade and a half. So the website eHarmony that came out probably 20 plus years ago had this idea. You fill out this gigantic extensive questionnaire, and there was key points of compatibility. And the idea was, if you matched up in these key areas of compatibility and that there was chemistry, you had a better chance for success. Mm-hmm. And the founder, Neil Clark Warren, wrote a book called Two Dates. And the idea is he puts together 25 different data points that we must consider to determine that alignment. And whether people agree with his philosophy or not, I just like the idea that it's really focused on, look, do we line up in these areas or not? Instead of allowing lust, limerence, attraction, entertainment, romance, and physical connection drive the bus, it's like what you said, let the logic, let the head drive the bus. Mm-hmm. And my sense is, and the reason why I wanted to have you on the channel is, I love what you're doing. I love that you are intentional about, for lack of a better word, selling vetting.
Yeah.
I think we all need to actually be a little detached or non-attached from the physical and really operate from a logical point of view.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate it. You're validating me so much. And I'll give you credit. You've been talking about this for 15, 20 years. I've only been talking about it for 7 or 8 years. And, it's amazing. Like, when, I don't know your professional history, but when you are in a profession like mine, that's very regulated, very standardized, and then being able to free yourself from that chokehold in a lot of ways and take the best of it, right? There's a lot of utility for formal training. I am a big proponent of gatekeeping certain professions. Yeah. I still do, because there's a lot of nonsense going out here online. But sure, there is a place for being more of an autodidact, for being more independent with our thinking. And the freedom that I was able to do in creating my vetting system and layering on top of it over the years has been such a wonderful process for me in solidifying my ideas based on what I learned professionally, officially, formally in school and training and practice. And then now in my personal experience and through my work as a coach. But now what I've done is I've layered on what I call the ideal match method.
Okay.
And so I have been matching my clients for years and to much success, which is great. I don't have a lot of clients. Like, I'm not the type of coach that's looking for masses of clients. And so I'll say, I'm working with thousands of clients. No, I'm very close, like a boutique.
Yeah.
Right. Sort of a coach. And I have only a few clients. I only have the capacity for a few clients, but I love that now it's so systemized, like it's a systematic process, very structured process that makes it so much clearer.
Yeah.
And I think that alleviates so much stress from my clients when they have a clear plan in place. They understand the concepts, but not just intellectually, they understand them in practice.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the disconnect, is that people hear all this information out there online and everything is competing and it's confusing and overwhelming. And then when they actually go out there and interact and go on dates, it's like, what do I do again? It can be so confusing.
Well, it's almost like, to some degree, it's almost like job interviewing to some degree. And what you said something a moment ago, so 15 years ago, I did one of my coaching sales pages says, become your own matchmaker.
Mhm.
And when you think of matchmaking, the idea behind matchmaking is I'm going to interview somebody and find out some data points about them. And then I'll match that with a person that matches those data points. Now, I think of the movie The Materialist. When they think of the data points, they're thinking height, hair, income, body type, that sort of thing. And it was very superficial in that
Right.
movie.
Yeah.
I think of the data points below the iceberg. Like there's the top attraction piece, like you said, the piece that we can see and figure out right away. But it's what are those data points below the water line? Emotional
Not below the waist.
maturity. Oh yeah, not below the waist, but but below the waterline in that sense of like emotional maturity, those deeper types of things. And while a matchmaker, which I think when a matchmaker does it the way you approach it, from a psychological point of view, from an emotional point of view, not just the I don't want to say superficial, but the first few things on a dating app that we all see, it's beyond that. There's real value of that. So before we wrap up, I want to make sure I leave your website and that sort of thing for people to reach out to you. I saw another question come in. I want to get to a few more before we might go a little over an hour. Is that going to jam you up at all?
No.
Okay. All right. Angela wrote, how do we start asking personal questions to a man? When's the best time to start?
Well, right away. I think you have to orient yourself to depth, right? Like you have to know what matters to you. And so if you want to seek someone out for a serious, whether it's marriage minded or for the rest of your life, a long-term relationship, then you're not going to be skirting the surface for long. Like there's obviously a little bit of chit chat and small talk that you need to have because social skills are important. But ultimately, you want to make sure that you are having that reciprocity in the conversation. So if you are able to be a little bit vulnerable and share a little bit more about yourself, then they may be a little bit more forthcoming about them as well. So I would always suggest modeling the behavior that you're looking for in the other person, not just trying to get the information from them. And this is also a good feminine, I don't want to say strategy, but it's a way of being, right? Like just a feminine way, mannerism that we work well in under those circumstances where we're not being so direct.
Well, I think you're really talking about just being soft, curious, open, and to that extent, whether we characterize it feminine or not, it's just really about being soft, open, and curious. I think that's just a beautiful place to be. And I like what you said, whether we model it or I think of it leading by example. Like if you lead by example, hopefully the other party interjects. This can be our last question for the evening, and I'm dying to hear what you think. But Deb says, what are your thoughts on long distance relationships?
Well, I will be happy to share with you my thoughts. I met my husband on Twitter back in the day. And this is, I actually wrote a book called Online Vetting, and it explains how you can use social media versus dating apps to meet, someone significant. And in the process, obviously, we were long distance. He was in Mexico, I was in the Cayman Islands, and that can be very difficult, but we weren't expecting to stay in those places, right? So having a plan to convene, obviously all going well, right? But being willing to relocate. If I wasn't willing to relocate, it would have been really hard to have a relationship indefinitely online or long distance. So that clarity needs to happen quickly. And I think that's new for a lot of people when I'm talking to them, that they are getting to the serious questions sooner than they would have normally. And they're like, well, does that make it seem, I don't know, like a little bit cold or a little bit too professional? No, like it's important to cover the bases first, because then you're just going to get attached and waste time emotionally, connecting with this person, but the logistics don't work out. So get those basic things out of the way early on. And if you're dealing with someone mature, they're going to be able to tolerate that. So if they're really put off by these difficult questions, that's probably a good data point.
You know, it's interesting because I have mixed feelings about long distance, and I was in a long distance relationship that eventually didn't work out. And we lived together at one point. So it's not like we didn't try. Long distance has a unique aspect to it. And that is because of the distance, you can have a lot of interesting conversations if you decide to ask deeper questions, probe. I mean, again, from a heart-centered, sincere place, from that curious, open, soft place. And you can get a lot of accomplished in that vein. I think the challenge for a lot of people is they get caught up in the limerence of it when they first meet. It's a bubble. It can seem all exciting. It's like a vacation. So if you don't have a plan right away, like what the two of you had a plan right away of how do we take this distance and shrink it. I think if you go in naively about that piece of the puzzle, it could usually bite you in the butt.
You have to have a lot of effective communication,
Yes.
consistency, and willingness to just approach the topic. Yeah, you can't beat around the bush. But we actually we vetted online because we were in these two different places for 9 months before we physically met in Miami. And so along the way, we weren't sure when we were going to meet. We just knew we wanted to meet. We just had to figure out when and how and all those sort of logistics. And then from there, it was such a sweet romance, but I will leave that for later and just encourage you that as long as you are willing to relocate, as long as you talk about it, ask the hard questions early on, stay in communication, be creative with your dates, on the phone. Don't sit down in front of the computer all boring or on the phone. Like, get up, share your life with them, be silly. Like, it doesn't have to be sexual that keeps it going. You have to have strong polarity, but it's the humor, like what you were saying, Jonathan, that really keeps you connected long distance.
Yeah. And I want to piggyback on something you said, because something occurred to me when you said the word hard question, or when you said hard questions. I think it's only hard if you're afraid that they're going to react the wrong way. And I've always said, if it's sincere and from the heart, you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. So if you're always coming from the heart, it might be hard for you to say because you're in fear. But guess what? If it's sincere, you really you don't need to be afraid, because the right person, in which I suspect your husband, your now husband, appreciated those juicy, I bet you had a lot of rabbit hole conversations, my sense is, and he probably appreciated the depth. So Dr. Taylor Burrows, thank you so much for being on. It was such a delight to have you.
It was a delight to be with you and to be here and to have a conversation with your community and just get to know you a little bit better, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. Folks, I'm going to put Dr. Burrows' link in the show notes. So if you want to connect with her, follow her on social media. She has some great reels on Instagram. So go join her Instagram right away. I endorse you because I think we need more people teaching really good discernment, which is about vetting techniques. And I'm really grateful to just even connect with you. So thanks so much.
You too, Jonathan.
Thanks. And everyone that shared questions, and certainly Annika for donating the $5 super sticker. Thank you so much for the love. We'll see you next time on my podcast. Wishing everyone a super duper wonderful evening. Be well, everyone. Bye now. Bye. Bye. Bye.